for allowing me to speak. I wanted to speak about an amendment which I intend to offer once we do get onto this Food and Drug Administration Safety and Innovation Act. This is an important amendment, and I want to advise my colleagues and all who are listening about it so that they can hopefully look into it and wind up supporting the bill. This is an amendment that Senator Vitter has worked with me on, as well as Senators Franken, Shaheen, Cole, Tom Udall, Tim Johnson, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Merkley, Senator Sanders, and Senator Sherrod Brown. The amendment has the strong support of many organizations that are focused on the cost of prescription drugs. Here is a list: AARP, AFL-CIO, Walmart, Families USA, Consumer Federation of America, US PIRG, Consumers Union, Center for Medicare Advocacy, AFSCME, National Legislative Association on Prescription Drug Prices, the Alliance for Retired Americans, various other companies that and organizations. The New Mexico Pharmacy Association strongly supports this legislation. This amendment addresses the root cause of anti-competitive, anti-consumer settlements that are entered into between brand name and generic pharmaceutical manufacturing companies. The effect of these settlements that they enter into is to delay timely access that consumers would have to generic drugs. This practice is commonly referred to as pay for delay, and it costs American consumers and it costs the federal government billions of dollars each year in higher drug costs. According to the Federal Trade Commission, in 2010, pay-for-delay agreements limiting access to affordable generic drugs protected $20 billion in name pharmaceutical companies, and that was at the expense of consumers who would have been able to pay much less for those same drugs. Madam President, ensuring access to affordable medication is an essential aspect of addressing the growth in health care spending. Prices for brand name prescription drugs have continued to outpace inflation, and overall spending on prescription drugs has also increased sharply. These statistics are amazing to me. The Kaiser Family Foundation found that in 2008, spending in the United States for prescription drugs was $234.1 billion. That's nearly 6 times what it was in 1990. Since generic drugs are on average a fourth the price of their brand-named alternatives, they can be an important source of affordable prescription drugs for many Americans. But to actually achieve the savings for consumers, these generics have to reach market in a timely manner. In 1984, Congress passed the bipartisan Hatch-Waxman Act to create market-based incentives for generic pharmaceutical companies to bring their drugs to market as quickly as possible. The express purpose of that law was to incentivize early generic drug competition while preserving incentives for pioneer companies to develop innovative new medicines. Instead, the pay-for-delay settlements that our amendment tries to address, these pay-for-delay settlements between brand name and generic pharmaceutical manufacturers have become commonplace. These settlements stifle competition. They delay access to generic drugs at significant cost to consumers and to the federal government. In these settlements, the first filer generic drug company agrees to delay market entry in exchange for monetary or other rewards. And this has the effect of blocking all subsequent generic filers from coming to market. Now, this is a complicated issue. I'd like to take a few minutes to explain how these agreements work and under existing law, and also how our amendment would solve this problem as we see it. Under current law, first-to-file generic drug applicants are rewarded with 180 days of market exclusivity. Exclusivity is awarded only to generic companies who are the first to file. It is not available to subsequent filers, even if they are successful in invalidating a patent or are ready to come to market immediately. So subsequent generic filers can only enter the market after the first generic filer has enjoyed its 180 days of market exclusivity. So under the pay-for-delay settlements, the first filer generic company essentially parks its exclusivity. That is, it blocks all other generic manufacturers from coming to market until 6 months after the market entry date. This is true regardless of the strength of the patent or the readiness of subsequent generic filers to come to market. So this means that under pay-for-delay settlements, first filer generic companies receive a reward from brand name companies for delaying market entry, usually a cash reward, a very substantial amount. They also get a reward from the current statute, this 180-day exclusivity period. And brand name companies get to extend their monopolies beyond what was originally intended under the Hatch-Waxman legislation. Consumers are left footing the bill and left with no option but to buy the more expensive drugs and to keep buying it, even after the generic should have come to market. So pay-for-delay settlements are also typically include an agreement that the first filer generic company can accelerate their entry into the market in the event that a subsequent filer invalidates the patent in question. In such cases, the subsequent filer triggers the first filer's exclusivity. Put simply, there is no incentive for subsequent generic filers to fight to invalidate weak patents and to come to market as soon as possible, even believe strongly that they could win their case in court. In other words, whereas the original intent of Hatch-Waxman was to reward companies that were the first to file and to bring their drugs to market, currently the reward goes to the first company to submit the necessary paperwork. And bringing the generic drug to market immediately has become an option which can be negotiated away. To fix the pay-for-delay problem, the law needs to be changed so that the first filers who enter into pay-for-delay settlements can no longer block generic subsequent filers who successfully challenge patents from entering the market and bringing affordable drugs to consumers. The amendment that we are offering provides this solution, or this fix, in the following 3 ways. First of all, the amendment grants the right to share exclusivity to any generic filer who wins a patent challenge in the district court. This means that if a subsequent filer successfully challenges a patent, even after a first filer has entered into a pay-for-delay settlement with a brand name company, that subsequent filer has a right to share exclusivity with the first filer. And this provision provides an incentive for subsequent filers to challenge patents and to stimulate competition. Second, the amendment we're offering maximizes the incentive for all generic challengers to bring products to market at the earliest possible time by holding generic settlers to the deferred entry date agreed to in the settlements that they have signed. Third, our amendment creates more clarity regarding litigation risks by requiring brand name companies to make a decision to litigate a patent challenge within the 45-day window provided for in the Hatch-Waxman Act. This use it or lose it provision enhances market certainty by eliminating the option for brand names to litigate patent challenges well after a generic has come to market. And finally, I think it's important to point out, Madam President, that the amendment that we're offering does not interfere with the rights of the parties to settle their patent litigation if they choose to do so. There have been numerous antitrust experts and consumer groups that have identified the Hatch-Waxman Act's structural flaw, the one that I've been describing here, as the source of this pay-for-delay problem and have called for a legislative solution. In addition, in 2003, Senator Hatch himself expressed concern that the flaw remained despite an attempt to fix it by including a, quote, use it or lose it provision in the Medicaid Modernization Act of 2003. Senator Hatch emphasized that the law should be changed to reward and not penalize generic companies that successfully invalidate a patent and are ready to come to market. Let me further underscore the need for this amendment with some concrete examples. I've got a chart here that I think will make the point that I'm trying to make. This table shows 3 drugs included in pay-for-delay settlements. And this is just 3. There are many, many of these settlements entered into each year. The delay to market in years for each of the 3 drugs. The 3 drugs are Altace, Lipitor, and Provigil. And the delay period that the settlements called for, in one case 2 years, in another case 1.5 years, in another case 6 years. And the lost savings to consumers, estimated lost savings to consumers. Let me just describe each of these a little bit. The first drug is King Pharmaceuticals' Altace. This is a generic version of Altace, was delayed for 2 years at an estimated cost of $637 million to consumers under a pay-for-delay settlement. In 2007, Lupin invalidated a patent covering Altace. Lupin could not launch or could not bring their generic to market despite being the party responsible for invalidating the patent and opening the market earlier. Instead, the first filer, Cobalt, accelerated its entry from 180 days of exclusivity, and Lupin was left with no reward, despite the fact that they had been the one that succeeded in the litigation to invalidate the patent. The second is a cholesterol-lowering drug familiar to most of us. It is the best-selling pharmaceutical drug in the history of the world, Lipitor. According to a 2008 New York Times report, Pfizer and generic manufacturer Ranbaxy Laboratories agreed to a settlement delaying the entry of a generic into the market by 20 months. The same report stated that the generic version of the drug was estimated to sell for less than 1/3 of the cost of the brand name Lipitor, which had earned $12.7 billion in sales the year before. A letter sent to the FDA Director Hamburg, last year by some of my colleagues in the Senate indicated that the federal government was spending $2.4 billion a year on Lipitor, and that a generic version was expected to generate $3.97 to $6.7 billion in savings annually. The final example on this chart here that I wanted to mention is Provigil. This is a sleep disorder drug, a generic version of which could have come to market as early as December of 2006. However, due to pay-for-delay settlements, a generic version of Provigil was just entered the market this year instead of in 2006. In addition, in October 2011, a subsequent generic filer, Apotex, invalidated a patent covering Provigil. Because the first filers in this case settled their patent litigation with the brand company 6 years prior, Apotex could not begin selling generic Provigil despite its court victory. Even the CEO of Cephalon, which is the brand name manufacturer of Provigil, is quoted as saying, this is the CEO of the brand name company saying, quote, "We were able to get 6 more years of patent protection. That's $4 billion in sales that nobody expected," end quote. In other words, the Provigil case represents 6 years and millions and tens of millions of dollars in lost savings to consumers. One of the largest of those consumers is the U.S. military. As this chart illustrates, this is an estimate of the effect of this settlement, this so-called pay-for-delay settlement related to Provigil on the Department of Defense. Assuming that a generic version of Provigil would have been released in 2006 with expiration of exclusivity, the Department of Defense alone would have saved $159 million for this drug accessed by almost 500,000 soldiers between the years 2006 and 2011. So had our amendment, the Fair Generics Act, and that is the name of our amendment, we've introduced it as a separate standalone bill, but had the Fair Generics Act been the law, generic versions of Provigil would very likely have been available 6 years ago. The first filers, knowing the patent was weak and subsequent filers could invalidate it and come to market themselves, would have fully prosecuted the patent fight instead of just settling it, as they did. As these examples illustrate, by granting shared exclusivity rights to any generic challenger who wins its patent case or is not sued by the brand company, our amendment will end the pay-for-delay problem and move us closer to the original intent of Hatch-Waxman. That original intent is more competition, greater access to affordable drugs, and substantial savings to the United States government and American consumers. Madam President, I hope when we get the opportunity to offer this amendment and consider it here on the Senate floor and have a vote on it, that my colleagues will support this amendment. It will be a substantial step forward for American consumers and will help us greatly in our effort to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for Americans. Madam President, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of I yield the floor.